We spoke already about the way in which Am Yisrael received the Torah after Hashem had suggested. He said, if you will keep my covenant, then you'll be my special people who will ultimately influence the whole world. So then we have the key verse, Vayanu Chalam Yachta Vayomru Kol Asher Diber Hashem Naaseh. All the people answered with one voice, together, whatever God Hashem asks us to do, we will do. And then there follows the Aseret HaDibros. And after the Decalogue, revealed on Mount Sinai, we have the next parsha, which deals primarily with illustrations. We call it the social code of the Torah, Mishpatim. Mishpatim don't really deal with law as is generally understood, and laws specifically about the judges, the different instances, or what we would call today civil and criminal law. Payments for damages, and what has to be paid by thieves. But we also have interspersed many other laws, but all are part of creating a society that follows the social, primarily, commandments that Hashem has given, also for the individual, returning lost articles, to avoid pain to animals, to help one's fellow man in difficult situations. And then at the end of Parshat Mishpatim, we have a continuation of the covenant which Hashem made with the people of Israel. And if you turn to chapter 24 of Exodus, which comes after the Mishpatim, after the judgments and all these many detailed illustrations, we have chapter 24, and God said to Moshe, come up to me, you and Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, with the sons of Aaron, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and bow down from afar off. And Moshe alone shall come near to me. And then Moshe came, told the people all the words of Hashem and all the judgments. And so this is really a call back. There's here then a description of what happened before the Torah was given. So it's a rather unusual order of what's written down in the Torah, that we know there's a principle in Muktam Ucha B'Torah. We don't follow chronological order, but you do follow a psychological or a pedagogical order in the whole of the Chumash. Some say that the whole of the Parshat Mishpatim was really declared before the actual Torah was given, because here there's a description again of what happened before the Torah was given, when the people were asked to keep away from the mountain. And so it says again, there's the key verse, the same key verse that we heard before. It says here, Vayam kol ha'am kol echad vayomeru. Again, the whole people with one voice said, Kol havadrim asher diber Hashem Naaseh. We'll do everything. It's a callback. And then Moshe wrote down the words of Hashem. He built an altar under the mountain with 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel, to show how they're united. And he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings to Hashem. And Moshe took half of the blood and put it in basins, half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar, and took the book of the covenant, read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Hashem, God has said, we will do and will obey. That's how it's translated here. This is a key verse. But it's slightly different to what it said before. Before it said we will do, and now it says, people said that Naaseh V'Nishmah. We will do and we will understand it. It's true, Shemiah also means obedience, but in that case, what's the difference between we will do? They say we will do obviously means we will obey in practice. So what's Nishma mean? The simple explanation is that we will begin to understand it. According to the previous shir where I explained, the essence of Naaseh V'Nishmah is that if you want to understand the mitzvot, we first have to do them. First we have to do an action, and after this we'll understand it. So I think here there's a very deep teaching. And it's the concept that I started describing yesterday, that the way of the Torah is to ask us to do mitzvot, even if we don't understand them, even if we don't appreciate them, and even if they go against our nature, because that is the way we'll ultimately identify our own will with the will of Hashem. And this is the secret, Chazal call it the secret which only the angels know. Only the angels know the secret that first you have to do, and then afterwards you'll understand. So I'm going to illustrate this. I mean, I haven't seen it put forward in such a fashion that I'm going to do it, but whatever I'm saying is based ultimately also upon, especially those who go more deeply into the concept of all the mitzvot. Maral and Rav Hirsch also and others. So the way I'm going to do it is to see, I'm going to take one of the mitzvot mentioned in Parshat Mishpatim, and I'm going to follow that mitzvah through, which we'll understand. The mitzvah I'm going to choose is the mitzvah returning lost articles. So let us see where this is mentioned. If you turn in next week's Parshat, Mishpatim, and you go to chapter 23, verse 4, says, Ki tivga sho oyivcha. What happens if you go in a field and you see, or go in the street, the ox of your enemy, sho oyivcha, o chamoro, or his donkey, to'eh, and they lost their way. Similarly applies to stray dog. What should you do? But you know the dog or the ox or donkey belongs to your enemy. And you know the nature of a person is not to go and help his enemy. That's very interesting. People don't always realize this. We think the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I grew up in non-Jewish schools, I heard all about it. Yes, it says there, yes, you were told, so he said, the founder of Christianity, you Jews, the Prussian is referring to, you were told, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, you know, love your neighbor and especially your enemy. Truth is, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that you should hate your enemy. A complete falsification. On the contrary, here we see, you see an enemy, a stray animal, and you hate that person, then Oshev to Shivenolo. It doesn't say give it back to him. Oshev to Shivenu, keep on. However difficult it is, even turns out you meet all the different animals of your enemies, you've got to do it to each one of them even 100 times. Oshev to Shivena, your enemy. And what type of enemy? I mean, the sages, there's different opinion. Some say it means your personal enemy. Yeah, big arguments with them. Or it can even mean, they say, if he's an enemy of your nation. Nevertheless, first of all, we learn out from here a principle. Look at it from the point of view of the poor animal. Yeah? Or your enemies, they're missing the animal, but you don't want to do anything good for him, but why should the animal suffer? You find them like the poor animal. He's looking all the time for his master, he can't find. And you see he's got a collar, it's got the name on and so on, so give it back to him. Yeah, even just give it back to him and even don't speak to him. You've got a mitzvah. You should do that. So, I'm going to show now this mitzvah of returning lost articles or stray animals. Because we know the way of illustrating principles and laws and even the pursuit of virtue. The Torah gives us all the time illustrations. It's not a code of law put forward to give the details of what you're supposed to do. That's left to Torah Sheba'al Peh. In fact, even there's some who say that Torah Shebechtav, things are written, some things are written just to point out certain inner aspects of the mitzvah. And there are many details for which they're just words or hints. Whenever it said, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor means and the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral description, which had to be learned by heart, in order that the book of the Torah should not become a book which is put in the Aron, in the Ark, and in the Holy Ark, wherever you'll be, and wherever Am Yisrael will be, and we'll forget about it. Or they'll only take it out for demonstrations of the most precious object that we have in the world. But still, Hashem wants this object to influence our lives. And that's the concept of not writing down the Torah Sheba'al Peh. If it's written down, then often a person postpones its fulfillment because it's written down. But it's separate from me. And it often happens, it's neglected. But if it's a living, constant connection, going from teacher to disciple, from generation after generation, then it becomes something that brings a different type of spirit, a live spirit, translating what the words, which are passive, to something dynamic. So, I'd like to take this in the concept. Okay, a person fulfills this law literally, but if we'll follow it through, we have to go to the wider exposition given to many of the mitzvot in the book of Devarim. Because in Deuteronomy, Moshe Rabbeinu, he repeated previous mitzvot that were mentioned, but as they are to apply when Am Yisrael really lives a natural life in Eretz Israel, and how to transform that natural life into holy life. And therefore he expounds many things which were known in the oral tradition, but they only become apparent later. So if you will turn to where we have this repeated. If you turn to the Jerusalem Bible, it's on page 237, and we have here the beginning of chapter 22, verse 1. The same mitzvah. But here, I'll read it for you first. You should not see your brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide yourself from them. You shall surely bring them back to your brother, and if your brother is not near you, if you do not know him, then you shall bring it to your own house. That is a stray animal or its plastic object, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks it, and you shall restore it to him. Again, in like manner shall you do with his ass, and so also with his garment, and with every lost thing of your brother's, which he has lost and you have found. You shall not do otherwise. Lo tuchal hit'alem. You must not hide yourself. So first I'm going to speak about this, just one expression, which is very significant. Lo tuchal. Literally means you will not be able to hide yourself from helping your brother. So it's the same mitzvah, only here the enemy becomes a brother. That's one aspect which is important to understand. How is it the enemy becomes a brother? Because it says in the middle of the Chumash, we have the prohibition. It's prohibited for a person to have hatred towards anyone else. He can have hatred for evildoers, but really then he shouldn't have hatred to the person, he should have hatred of evil. The person can only live a pure life pursuit of virtue if he hates vice, which exists. And he's got to drive away temptations to criminality and to vice in himself. he's got to do the same also, to hate it in his heart, wherever it comes up. You hear about people doing terrible acts, you've got to hate the act. And therefore, people sometimes become addicted to evil. You should hate it. Nevertheless, even once it's an addiction, it becomes a mental illness. And if it's mental illness, well, the person can't help it. But you've got to have in yourself hatred of such things. You've got to do your best to try to remove it. So even if he's an enemy who is dedicated to do evil, you've got to do every way possible to arouse his good aspect of his nature. If you can't, you've got to even say, I hate these acts that you're doing. You see, so that the person will perhaps desist from it. But the question is asked sometimes, why, when it's first mentioned, it speaks about enemies, not only this mitzvah, other mitzvahs as well, and here it already becomes your brother. Your brother doesn't mean literally, it means your fellow man has become your brother. They say like this: all of us, we have within ourselves hatred, the power of hatred hidden. And it can come up because of very personal grievances, so you hate the other person. The Torah teaches us how to overcome the hatreds which are entirely not really allowed, which you shouldn't have hatred. In other words, you've got to try to purify yourself. So that comes by means of working, first of all, by doing actions of kindness to people you hate. And even the Gemara discussed the question with a parallel mitzvah of helping an animal that's breaking down under its burden. So there's also, we have it mentioned once in the Chumash when it applies to your enemy, and once when it applies to your friend. And the Gemara says, you should help let's say you've got two choices. You've got a friend of yours who's lost his articles, and you've got an enemy of yours who lost his articles. The Gemara says, in this instance, the parallel instance, whom should you help first? First help your enemy. Why? The Gemara gives the answer. Why? Because you know the answer. Lakuf v'jitzro. If you want to remove hatred from your heart, you must do actions of love to the person you hate. As even Shlomo HaMelech says like this: if your enemy is hungry, give him a lot of bread to eat, give him a good meal to eat, and that way he'll stop being your enemy, and also you'll stop hating him. But it can go to even to, now that explains something else. What is the significance? What's the difference in saying you shouldn't hide yourself from the mitzvah of return a lost article, and saying you will not be able to hide yourself? What's the difference? The difference like this. It's mentioned Pirkei Avot. Mishpatel rotzoncha merotzon aborei should nullify your will before the will of God, in order that ultimately you'll be able to constantly fulfill the will of God. We know that if a person repeats an action 1,000 times, he can easily become addicted to it, and therefore he'll do it automatically. And if you ask him to do differently, he might not be able to. Just like if a person, let's say we do today, a person's a habitual smoker, and then he realizes it's not good for him, you ask him to change it. It's very difficult, because smoking has become part of his daily daily nutrition, it's like nutrition to many people. They find, if they're chain smokers, that much more important than food for them. And if you ask them to stop, they can't. Can't stop. It's very difficult to have to. So it become part of their nature. It's not from childhood till in the late decades of a person's life is a constant smoker. Very difficult. So this is the situation with most of us. Some people become addicted to losing their temper, become addicted to gambling, addicted to drinking. There's all types of addictions in which a person, that's my nature. I can't change it. The Torah says you can change it. You can change it but you can't change it just with your own desire to change it. You can change it by constant acts in the opposite direction. To break a bad habit, you've got to create good habits. And once you create good habits, of course sometimes then the good habits are no longer done out of the free will. No longer free. You can't say an addicted person has a free nature. No, you can't change himself. There's a very subtle line between people still having a certain amount of control and somebody who have no more control left. This is one of the big problems that faces the great sections of human society today. So how do you change it? That's why we need Hashem, who's created man, has created also all the different pleasures and also all the different poisons that human beings can imbibe. So Hashem has given us a Torah of becoming addicted to virtue. Addicted to virtue in a manner that is lo pachot v'lo yoter, lo tosef alav v'lo tikra mimenu. And that's from the beginning of the giving of the Torah, which we're reading these days, until the end of the Torah. We go through a whole gamut of different mitzvot, which are given as a mitzvah, aseh or lot aseh. In Sefer Devarim, there are some mitzvot, and there's a reason for it as well, we can understand, where instead of it saying al tit alem, it said lo tuchal it alem. You reach a level when you won't be able to stop yourself from helping your fellow man. Not only helping your fellow man, even if it was your enemy, you'll also be able to do it because you've decided you're following, constantly helping, and therefore even a person who externally would appear to be an enemy, there's perhaps even justification for it, lo tuchal, you won't be able to. You'll still want to help him and his animal with a full heart. You can't change it anymore. So the prohibitions become lo tuchal. And in fact, this is what happens. I mean, people, saints, who've also had temptations at times in their early youth, but they worked themselves to such an extent. You'll ask him to go and do evil act. It's almost impossible for him. He can't do it, just because that's part of his nature. Lo tuchal. That means if we follow the parameters of the Torah, which work according to a balance, not al titzak habit, not going too much, not too little, but Hashem has given us the balance whereby we should adopt certain deeds which will change our nature, and as a result we will identify our own nature with what we can call the highest level of virtue possible, to be like the Malachim. The Malachim automatically, they can't do wrong. They say, on the one hand, the human being is not an animal, because an animal even if the animal does things which are terrible, but it can't help it. That's its nature from birth. The whole animal species is such that it does acts of tearing up other animals to eat them. So that's part of its nature. That's the lower animalistic instinct. And the other instinct which a person has is to be angelic. But we can't be like the angels. Why? Because the angels have no evil aspect. They've got 1 foot, not 2 feet. They've got no choice. But the person can also bring himself to be like the angel, that he also has no choice. If it's a question of helping somebody that's got no choice, he feels he has to do it. Because the Torah says he's already made a habit of it, even 100 times, to help his fellow man, to help his fellow man's animals, and then he'll do it. So that's also how you can change from being a miser to be a man of generosity. Say a person's recognized bekisa with his pocket. There's some people, naturally they say, I cannot resist helping someone who's in trouble. That's the person who's inspired by chesed constantly. Some say addicted to it. Even though he started off at the beginning being self-centered, now he's no longer so self-centered. You want to put it in philosophical terms, there's something here as well, which has to do with what's called moral autonomy. The Torah is after all recognized in the world as a religion, and religion contains morality, and therefore many philosophical discussions say that's heteronomy. That means you're accepting authority outside the inner moral imperative. It's not moral autonomy. Kant, for example, was one who developed a great deal. We call it the categorical imperative, is moral autonomy. It's the ought that exists in the human way of thinking also. I ought to do this. So I ought to help, but in fact, I'm too lazy to help, so I'm not helping. But I really ought to help. There's a conflict here. My nature says, you're too tired, my conscience says, go and help. So that's called moral autonomy. And morality is the ultimate decider what I should do. So sometimes I say, well, even though I'm a miser by nature, so sometimes I'll overcome it, but not regularly. So you've got to try and reach moral autonomy, that the moral imperative takes over. But it can't admit it, that really, in fact, one of his major disciples was Hermann Cohen, the major disciple of Kant, and he developed this concept that the Torah is the religion of pure reason. You know that Kant's major book is called The Critique of Human Reason, Practical Reason. That's the different category. So he develops this concept. He says, no, Judaism is taking the law of God as being identical with the moral autonomy. It's also that's also the depth of the later work of Viktor Frankl, called the unconscious God. That means the unconscious God is in the conscience. That is the voice of God in man, and that's expressed in the Torah. How to develop it? So which way to develop it? It's sow a deed, they say. Sow a deed, reap a habit. So a good deed, reap a habit. A good habit. Reap a habit, sow a character. Because a good habit creates character. And sow a good character and work on it, you reap a destiny. So that's Lo Tuchal. That's the Naaseh V'Nishmah, the secret which is only known to the Malachim. I mean, the Malachim, they have that secret because it's given to them, but it's given to them, they have no choice. They be given the secret by Hashem. They Osei Devaro, V'Shomei L'Kol Devaro, automatically. With us, not automatic. We have to work on it. And we can work on it through the power of the Torah.